I'm Matt Doran. The Crime Investigation Australia casebook contains two especially intriguing murders. One is a cold case involving the mysterious death of a wealthy gay man and the execution of his lover and heir to his fortune. The other, the slaughter of a pregnant mother and her infant daughter, where the killer is found hiding in plain sight. It's May 2004. In the Victorian coastal town of Mornington, 37-year-old John Miles Sharp makes a dramatic televised appeal for information about his wife and infant daughter who've been missing since March.
That's all I'm really worried about, my daughter. If they could just come forward and, even if you don't ring me, just the media or police or her family.
Observers, including police and friends of the missing woman, are sceptical. They see Sharp's body language and his strange eye movements as suspicious signs that he knows more than he's letting on. But the truth, when it comes out, is more chilling than even the most cynical observers could imagine. A quiet, apparently unassuming man becomes the centre of a horror story that defies belief. And from then on, he'll be known as the Mornington Monster. New Zealand-born Anna Kemp meets fellow bank officer John Sharp in the early 90s. After a whirlwind romance, they marry in 1994 and later settle in Mornington, about 50 kilometres south of Melbourne. In August 2002, Anna gives birth to a daughter, Gracie Louise Sharp. The baby is born with hip dysplasia, but Anna nurses her through it. She is a devoted mother, as her friend Samantha Jeffrey recalls.
Gracie was everything to her. Anna didn't work out of the home. She was staying home and looking after Gracie. That was her role that she'd chosen. And yeah, she was 100% there for Gracie, and Gracie was what she was living for, I suppose.
In November 2003, Anna becomes pregnant again. Another friend, Dawn Shaw, remembers Anna's reaction to the news.
Anna was very excited. She'd always said that she didn't want one child. She never wanted Gracie to be on her own, so that once, as life goes on, once Mum and Dad are no longer there, at least Gracie would have somebody. So that was very important to Anna. She didn't want one child.
We made a promise to each other, do you remember? That we'd only have one?
But John Sharp seems less pleased about the impending birth of his second child.
The times that I would visit, I was starting to see a change in his demeanour. I don't think the announcement of her having a second child was something that John actually was happy about.
It's going to be fine.
How's it going to be fine?
It was almost like he was hostile towards her, which just struck me as odd because he'd always seemed a quite gentle, shy, retired person, and for him to yell back at her in front of Gracie, I just thought that was rather strange. And you could feel the tension in the air between the two of them. They were obviously at odds.
This is not okay!
In March 2004, John and Anna move into a new house in Prince Street, Mornington. There's a coldness between them, but life seems to go on fairly normally. On Tuesday, March the 23rd, the expectant mum rings her health insurance company at around 2 p.m. to have the new baby added to the family's health cover. This is the last known contact she will have with the outside world. Samantha Jeffrey has made plans to get together with Anna later in the week.
We're going to meet on the Friday morning, and everything was going fine. And then out of the blue on the Thursday, I get a phone call, and it's John.
Have you heard from Anna?
I've never spoken to him on the phone before. I don't understand why he's calling, but I listened to what he had to say, and he said to me, Anna's left. And I said, okay.
John Sharp also rings Dawn Shaw.
I just thought it was odd that it was John ringing for starters at work. And I asked, where Anna was, and he said that she'd left with another man and that she'd left Gracie behind. which immediately alarm bells rang. I had the hairs on the back of my neck stood up because I knew that Anna would never leave Gracie behind. There was no way Anna would have left her child behind.
On Wednesday morning, Chris Rays, a TV antenna technician, arrives to do an adjustment that Anna had booked him for.
Hello. Oh, hello. I'm here to repair aerial.
John is reluctant to let Rays into the house. The antenna man thinks he sees somebody else inside.
I just had a feeling there's an older gent there in the house, probably standing 8-10 feet behind him, just sort of in the background when we're talking to him at the door. But I had no contact with that person again and didn't see that person again, otherwise I would have remembered.
Subsequent police inquiries into Anna's disappearance turn up no sign of this older man in the Sharp home. On Friday, March 26th, Sharp takes Gracie to preschool and tells staff she won't be returning. Later that day, he takes his daughter with him as he buys 2 spearheads for a spear gun he bought in January. In Dunedin, New Zealand, Anna's family become concerned when she doesn't respond to phone calls. Her mother, Lilia, speaks to her parish priest, Father Tony Harrison.
She told me that she had been trying to get a hold of Anna. She had spoken to her on the Monday, and she then tried to get in touch with her, left numerous messages on her, the answer phone, but none of them were returned.
Look, there's something I have to tell you.
While Father Harrison is visiting Lilia, John Sharp calls her.
And then when John Sharp rang up, he then told her that Anna had left him for another man. And I still remember Lily saying, "We don't do that." And the story was that Anna was going to come back on the Monday and pick Gracie up.
John Sharp also tells Lilia that this other man is the father of the child Anna is carrying. With Lilia's agreement, Father Harrison contacts Constable Woodhouse of Dunedin Police.
I didn't think there was anything major in it. I thought initially that being a Catholic girl, perhaps she was ashamed at having left a husband for another man, and she was worried that her mother's reaction to it may not have been positive.
As the days pass, Anna's family becomes more and more concerned. Constable John Woodhouse visits the missing woman's local health centre at Mornington. A nurse remembers Anna and says she'd seemed upset by her husband's reaction to her pregnancy.
I found that very curious, and that was a theme that was also expressed by Anna's friends and mother, that if John Sharp's reaction to Anna's pregnancy didn't improve, it would spell the end of their marriage.
You promised me you'd go back.
Now, that didn't make any sense to me at all, because if Anna had told John that she was pregnant to another man, why would she be at all concerned at John's reaction to her pregnancy? So I think it was a fair conclusion for me to draw that John Sharp was indeed the father of that unborn child.
Sharp tells Anna's friends and family that Anna had come to collect Gracie on Sunday the 28th of March and had left in a taxi. John Woodhouse obtains the phone numbers of every taxi company operating in Mornington.
None of the taxi firms that operated in that area had any record of any collection from the Prince Street house. So that was another point that just didn't add up.
After making numerous attempts to contact John Sharp by phone, Constable Woodhouse puts together a case file, which is sent to Australia. On May the 20th, the file lands on the desk of Detective Sergeant Shane Brundell of the Victoria Police Missing Persons Unit.
Initially, we had some concerns with the disappearance of Anna and Gracie, mainly because you're talking about a 41-year-old woman, married. All her background detailed, that she was a responsible lady who was a responsible mother, a responsible wife, and also pregnant at the time as well. So her disappearance was totally out of character. So in that light, we had some initial concerns for her disappearance. We went down to the Mornington area, and we thought we'd start with the husband in relation to the disappearance and whether he had any information that might be able to assist us in locating them.
She came and picked up Grace and she's staying with another man.
After interviewing John Sharp and taking a detailed statement from him, police begin watching him closely. A couple of days later, he is seen to walk into bushes next to a public toilet on the Esplanade at Mornington. He picks up a blue plastic bag, takes out what appears to be a credit card, and then puts the bag back in its hiding place. Police check the bag and find that it contains Anna's mobile phone and her Visa card. They later find her driver's licence.
At that point in time, that's when the suspicion certainly grew to the point where we firmly suspected that she had met with foul play and that John Sharp was then a prime suspect for her disappearance.
37-year-old John Sharp just wants to hear from his estranged wife, Anna Kemp.
On May the 26th, just over 2 months since Anna and Gracie's disappearance, John Sharp makes his televised appeal for his wife and daughter's return. Detective Constable Mark Kennedy had taken Sharp's statement when he was first interviewed, but the man he sees on TV is quite different.
I thought he was acting, quite obviously acting, pretending to be a concerned, emotional father and husband and pretending to be terribly worried about them. Whereas when I took the statement and met him initially, he was a bit more matter-of-fact and less emotional, a bit more consistent in his answers. And he actually said at one stage, I don't really care where Anna is, I just want to know where Gracie is. Whereas on TV, he was quite, in my opinion, quite false, pretending to be concerned. And I continually said to Shane, I wish I had $1 for every person who said to me, you know, this bloke's just pretending, he's acting, and he doesn't look real or, you know, truthful.
Police are now convinced that Anna has met with foul play and that John Sharp is responsible, but they are leaving nothing to chance. They know Sharp has possession of Anna's Visa card and mobile phone. The Visa card has been used to order flowers on the internet for Anna's mother, Lilia, but Lilia doesn't believe for a moment that the flowers are actually from Anna. Anna's mobile phone has also been used on a number of occasions since her disappearance, and strange emails have been sent to members of her family. Missing Persons Unit officers speak again to friends and relatives, and they grill John Sharp repeatedly, looking for a possible motive.
We got to a stage where we were satisfied that we had sufficient evidence to arrest John Sharp. As a result of all those inquiries and after speaking with countless people. And so subsequently John was arrested and interviewed in relation to their disappearances.
No, I've never hurt Anna in my life.
At first, Sharp sticks to his story that Anna has run off with another man, but the evidence against him is very strong.
I knew that he was nearly there. I knew that it was nearly though he wanted to tell us, but he couldn't tell us.
Yeah.
And at one stage I thought he wants to tell us, but he can't. And I actually said, John, do you want to write it down to tell us? It was nearly like he had a fear of saying it.
After several hours, Sharp speaks to members of his family, then confesses to the murders of Anna and Gracie.
I didn't want her to suffer anything, so I killed Anna and Gracie both when they were sleeping.
But even the most case-hardened police officers aren't prepared for what John Miles Sharp tells them next, as he gives a horrendous account of how he slaughtered his wife, his daughter, and his unborn child. On the afternoon of June the 22nd, 2004, John Miles Sharp confesses to the murder of his wife, Anna, and their infant daughter, Gracie. He then tells the arresting officers a chilling story that they can scarcely believe. By early 2004, Sharp is already planning to kill Anna, and he's decided on the weapon he'll use. He buys a spear gun and 2 spears, paying in cash so the transaction cannot be traced. On the evening of March the 23rd, he and Anna go to bed between 9 and 10 p.m. Anna quickly falls asleep, but John lies brooding about the problems in their marriage. He gets up, goes to the garage and returns with the spear gun. He kneels on the right side of the bed and fires the spear gun at close range, striking Anna in the temple. But the shot doesn't kill her, so he uses the second spear to finish her off. He then covers Anna's body in towels and goes downstairs to sleep on a sofa bed. The following morning, he attempts to remove the spears from Anna's head, but they won't budge. So he unscrews the shafts and leaves the spearheads embedded in Anna's temple. He drags her body downstairs and buries it in a shallow grave he's already dug in the backyard. John Sharp has murdered his wife, it seems, simply because he can't face up to his marital problems. But this socially inept, weak and dependent man will soon commit an even more vile and heartless crime. On Saturday evening, 4 days after he's murdered Anna and after attempting to convince her friends and family that she's left him for another man, Sharp puts Gracie into her cot at around 9 o'clock. He has several drinks to numb his senses. Then goes to the garage to get his spear gun. He returns to Gracie's room, leans over her and fires a spear into the left side of his daughter's head. Then shoots her again. And then a third time. Still, the little girl clings to life. Desperately, he pulls one of the spears out of her head and fires it again. Now, Gracie is finally dead.
To do that to your own child, I was just dumbfounded and I was shocked. Yeah. When he actually said it, I recall looking over at Shane. I was so shocked to see Shane's reaction.
The detail he went to and how matter-of-fact he detailed those circumstances, it was cold, it was chilling, it was an eerie feeling and something that I have never experienced before in relation to homicide interviews, and it's something that I didn't particularly like and it's something I hope I never have to go through again.
The morning after killing his daughter Gracie, Sharp removes the spears from her head. He covers his face with a towel so he doesn't have to look at what he's done to his own child. He wraps her body in garbage bags and a tarpaulin and dumps it at the Mornington Refuse Transfer Station, along with the spear gun, spears and some of Gracie's clothing and toys. A couple of days later, he buys 2 tarpaulins, some duct tape and a chainsaw. He digs up Anna's body and cuts it up into 3 pieces. He then wraps up her remains and dumps them along with the chainsaw at the refuse transfer station. After Sharp has made his astonishing confession, the tragic news is relayed to Anna's family in New Zealand.
It was obviously a harrowing time for the family. The news that Anna and Grace had been placed in a refuse tip was also horrendous news. Their loved daughter and sister had been treated in such a way.
Police make plans to search the waste transfer station where Sharp has dumped the remains of Anna and Gracie, but it is a daunting task.
Inquiries with that transfer station showed the enormity of what we were going to be in for, because they then transfer all refuge to a huge landfill site down at Toorong, which is also, you know, you've got asbestos and other hazardous chemicals and materials also dumped at that location.
Police volunteered for the search today, saying they wanted to help bring closure for Anna Kemp's family in New Zealand.
As police gear up for a search of the Toorong landfill site, the story dominates news headlines throughout Victoria and beyond.
Anna Kemp's husband, John Miles Sharp of Mornington, has been charged with murder and is due back in court in November.
It's important to investigators that information be carefully controlled.
Media can work for you and it can work against you. Certainly when we you know, became aware, or the suspicions grew in relation to the whereabouts of Anna and Gracie, and the media hype grew, we had to implement a strategy to manage that. And we wanted to make sure that it didn't get out of control, whereby the media were printing information we certainly wanted to keep secret for obvious reasons from an investigative point of view, and also that the media weren't stepping in areas that could potentially compromise investigations.
The search for the remains of Anna and Gracie begins in late June.
It was wet, very cold, wet. It was raining all the time and windy, and they had gumboots and protective gear on to protect us from the asbestos. So your clothing got covered in mud and your boots got covered in mud.
Despite the appalling conditions, there is no shortage of police volunteers. The man in charge of the investigation, Homicide Squad Chief Detective Steve Francis, is approached by several officers who are prepared to put in extra time to find the bodies.
They came to me, and prior to finding Anna and Gracie, people come to me and said, we will continue to search on our days off if we have to find Anna and Gracie. That's how important it was to me and to them. And just reflects the dedication to the people that were involved in this investigation. So, it's an honour for me to be involved with these people, and just to see the dedication of police officers doing a tough job.
As the search continues, Police Chaplain Jim Pilmer is a welcome presence for officers working under the most trying conditions.
I have found that just being there, which sounds negative and passive, is actually very valuable, and I had some phone calls and a letter saying just that, thanks for being there, when in fact I didn't think I did much. One feels that there's value in it, even though at the time you don't think so.
After days of intensive searching through thousands of tonnes of waste, there's a breakthrough. A tarpaulin is uncovered containing some of Anna's remains. By mid-July, all of her remains have been unearthed. Then, searchers find Gracie's body.
Shane and I carried Gracie out and carried her out up through the landfill side up to the main gates, and we waited for the undertaker. And again, I was pleased for Lily and her family, her sons. Pleased for everyone, really, that we'd found her.
When the remains of both Anna and Gracie were located, there was a liaison officer appointed by New Zealand Police to deal directly with Anna's family in New Zealand. I understand that they were relieved that the remains were located.
John Woodhouse accompanies Anna's family to Mornington.
We were able to have a funeral service at Mornington for Anna and Gracie, and for Anna's friends and acquaintances in Victoria, and that was an important part of the healing process before the funeral here.
It was something that we wanted to do over there because there'd been so many people that Anna had been associated with, and also the kindergarten people that Gracie had gone to were able to be there, and they were, quite upset by by the whole incident, and also members of John's family came to that.
I think Father Tony did an amazing job. It was spiritual, it was healing, and a beautiful service, really, to what's a horrendous episode.
John Miles Sharp is sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 33 years for the murder of his wife and daughter. He could not be charged over the death of the unborn child Anna was carrying. Anna's friends are still struggling to come to terms with the magnitude of Sharp's crimes.
It was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. I can't imagine anyone harming another person, let alone their own child. And that part probably disturbed me the most, was that poor Gracie had done absolutely nothing to deserve anything that happened to her.
I miss Anna a lot. Because she was my best friend, I have nobody like that I could talk to. There's just little things I want to tell her, and sometimes you just want to talk. I don't have a mechanism anymore. She's gone. I'm never going to get her back.
It's a tragic story, but it's also a story of exceptional skill and dedication from police teams on both sides of the Tasman.
If there are any heroes in this story, in my opinion, it is the police officers that spent days and weeks toiling in that tip, which must have been an absolutely awful task. But they never gave up.
For investigators like Shane Brundell, this is a case that will not easily be forgotten.
It's a healing process for us as much as anyone else. And with the passage of time, that gets a little easier. But it certainly makes you appreciate your own circumstances, your own family, and you know, to cherish every moment that you have with them, knowing that there's people out there that you know, resort to these sorts of means to eradicate their own families. It just makes you, you know how special and important your own families are to you, for sure.
Our second story features a rich, flamboyant businessman who died suddenly and suspiciously in 1990. Roger Claude Tessedra had made millions from gay baths and bathhouses. Giant cash businesses set up when gay liberation exploded in the 1970s. He'd promised to leave large bequests to his many friends, but after his death, a surprise new will left the bulk of his estate to his last lover, Ludwig Goetsch. It wasn't long before Ludwig was murdered. It's a story from the dark side of the Sydney gay scene, a tale of money, greed, lust, revenge and murder. The sinister inheritance hidden in the will of death. The events leading to the sudden and mysterious death of gay millionaire Roger Claude Tessedra and the brutal murder of his last lover, Ludwig Goetsch, stretch back to Sydney in the early 1950s. It's a time of rigid and conservative laws and social values. To be homosexual at this time is to be forced to live a lie. Gay club owner Rod Stringer remembers that even gay men attending private parties were harassed.
Quite often, there'd be a knock on the door and it'd be the police that'd be raiding the parties and things like that because they thought there was some untoward sexual activity going on in these private parties and things. But that was all through that late 50s, early 60s era.
Into this rigid and dangerous world comes Roger Claude Tessedra, a handsome, gay and lusty young Frenchman. He's been raised in the brothels of Paris during World War II, and he knows what it is to be dirt poor and hungry. In Sydney's bohemian King's Cross, he sets up business as a florist and later a hairdresser, quickly learning how to tickle the till, slipping petty cash into his pockets and avoiding taxes. But the real money starts flowing when he becomes a pioneering restaurateur, where his natural charm and skill makes him the perfect maitre d'.
Well, I think he was a well-dressed, certainly a good-looking sort of a man, you know, and he always had sort of very attractive companions and things like that. Didn't have any problems sort of having, you know, one of them attractive people on his arm around town.
Roger Claude's restaurants are the talk of the town as he entertains the rich and famous at places like The Plucker and Le Cabanon. Oxford Street identity Craig Petrie remembers his style and generosity.
Oh, Roger was fantastic. Wonderful, wonderful maitre d'. Always made you feel welcome, always gave you that free glass of wine, always. Nothing was a problem. His staff were the same.
By the 1970s, Roger Claude has become a key member of a group of tough inner-city business and property tycoons. They operate a chain of bars, lavish nightclubs, discos and bathhouses, like Capriccio's 253, Jules and Patches. Most profitable of all are the gay bathhouses, with their low costs and their stream of customers around the clock.
And a steam bath can run with a staff of 2 people. You know, you can get 100, 200, 300 people a day go in there. It's sort of $5 or $10, you know, a person. So they could be turning over $2,000 or $3,000 a day, you know, with a very minimum staff.
The King's Steam Bathhouse is the jewel in Roger Claude's business empire. He skims thousands of dollars from its cash registers and travels the world buying antiques and paintings which he uses to turn an old house in Paddington into a palace. By the early 1980s, he is riding the wave of sexual liberation that turned Sydney into the gay capital of the South Pacific. In 1981, he meets Ludwig Goetsch, a 35-year-old Dutchman who becomes his last great love. Goetsch is a poor hairdresser from the wrong side of town, and many of Roger Claude's close friends and potential benefactors believe he is a consummate gold digger. Author Sandra Harvey investigated Ludwig's life.
He was a complex character in a way. He was opportunistic. He came from a very poor background, and I think when he met Roger, he realised he was on a good thing. I think Roger was a difficult man to have been with, from all accounts. He tried to emulate Roger in many ways, and he didn't have the charisma or the business nous or the chutzpah that Roger Claude had. So he was sort of like a bit of a sad figure in that regard.
Hi there, how you doing?
Others, like barman Justin Brash, have their suspicions about the new man, but are more philosophical.
Ludwig had sort of been around in the background for a long time, socially, but it was a big surprise when they got together. Ludwig was funny, you know. He was a bit creepy, I always thought, but Roger fell head over heels for him.
The relationship with Ludwig becomes even closer when a blood test in 1985 reveals Roger Claude has been infected with HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus that's sweeping through gay communities around the world. At this time, there are no effective treatments and gay men are dying in their thousands. By 1988, he begins to suffer from a range of illnesses and decides to make out his will, in which he names Ludwig as the main beneficiary. But significantly, he also lists large bequests to his closest friends and former lovers. After that first will is written, his lawyer of many years decides to retire, and Roger Claude appoints a new solicitor to handle his affairs. The new lawyer is Brian Roberts, and he will become a key player in the drama that's now unfolding.
Sweetheart, our friends are leaving. They've come to say goodnight to you.
As Roger Claude grows sicker, he tells his closest friends repeatedly and publicly exactly what he's leaving them in his will. Top of the list is a handsome former lover, Eduardo Alderighi, who is also infected with HIV and living in a weekender house owned by Roger Claude in the Blue Mountains, west of Sydney. Eduardo is promised use of the house for the rest of his life and a bequest of $200,000. To avoid leaving them any tax problems, Roger Claude also makes a black will, a secret list of who will get to share his many antiques, paintings and other personal treasures worth several $1 million. He gives this black will treasure list to Ludwig.
I will. I'll put it in a very safe place. Open up.
Throughout his illness, Ludwig stays close by, taking more and more control of his life, caring for his every need and administering his medications. In March 1990, Roger Claude asks his new solicitor, Brian Roberts, to draw up a new will. What happens next is disputed, but one question remains to this day. Did this vital document allocating millions of dollars also carry within it a death sentence for both Roger Claude Tessèdre and Ludwig Goetsch? In March 1990, millionaire gay businessman Roger Claude Tessèdre, suffering from full-blown AIDS, decides to have a new will drawn up. He gives the job to his new solicitor, Brian Roberts, who brings copies of the new document to his Paddington mansion. Several neighbours are called to witness as he signs. The neighbours allege they are not shown the entire will, just the signature page at the end. One of the neighbours says she remembers joking, "What am I signing here, my death sentence?" And Roger Claude explains that it's his new will, that they are just witnessing his signature, not the actual contents and details. This version of events is repeated by one of the people who later investigated the will, Sydney lawyer Victor Bazanis.
They were told they were there to witness a will. Tessèdre made a big flourish, signed it, and then Roberts walked over, invited them to sign it, but said because there were personal things in it, he didn't want them to see it. So he covered it over with a sheet of paper. The will that itself was not a forgery, but it was doctored because later forensic investigation found that the middle bit, where all the beneficiaries were named, etc., were out of line with the paragraphs, which suggested that they were inserted later.
Brian Roberts apparently hands a copy of the new will to Roger Claude and supposedly keeps the original.
Hello?
Still, Ludwig remains in control. He answers the incoming phone calls and angers Roger Claude's friends when he discourages them from visiting, saying his lover is asleep or too ill to see anyone. A close friend of Ludwig, who does not want to be identified, says it was Roger Claude's wish that Ludwig act as a gatekeeper.
Ludwig would screen the calls on his behalf, and a lot of people actually pointed the finger at Ludwig later on, saying that he had cut off a lot of people from Roger towards the end, but it wasn't the case. It was actually Roger's choice. He asked Ludwig to do so, and I know because I was there when he did.
When several friends do manage to visit him, Roger Claude tells them about their bequests in his will and also tries to show them the Black Will treasure list.
I can't find it, sweetheart.
But each time, Ludwig claims it can't be found. The existence and contents of the Black Will are becoming more public, and Ludwig is noticeably nervous and unhappy. At a dinner on Easter Sunday night, guests notice the relationship is frostier than ever. Roger Claude, now easily fatigued, retires early. When the meal finishes, they call in to his bedroom to say goodnight. As usual, the bed and the bedroom are a mess, but Roger Claude, they insist, is quite bright and in good spirits. At 8 a.m. the next morning, Easter Monday, 1990, Ludwig telephones their close friend, Denise Cousins, to tell her Roger Claude has died. As the news spreads, friends and former lovers express shock and disbelief, and many immediately suspect foul play. Denise Cousins and her husband Charles are first to arrive at the house after the ambulance, and they notice something very strange. The bedroom is unusually neat. The bed recently remade, and Roger Claude is lying on his back, tucked in with his arms by his sides. Ludwig says this is exactly how he found him. And there's something else. Apart from this strangely neat room, friends say Roger Claude never slept on his back. But there is no investigation. His doctor issues a death certificate. The sudden, mysterious death is the talk of the gay world.
Thought he might have been smothered. He thought he might have been given an overdose. Nobody really knew. The manner in which the body was so whipped away so quickly, the covert way that Gertz was carrying on.
Ludwig tells some of Roger Claude's friends that an autopsy shows that Roger Claude died of a heart attack. Then he tells others it revealed stomach cancer. He's lying. In fact, there was no post-mortem. And as Roger Claude was known to be suffering from full-blown AIDS, there is no further police investigation at the time. Roberts now produces the document he claims to be the last will and testament of Roger Claude to Cedra. Ludwig is named as sole executor and beneficiary of the bulk of the estate, officially valued at $2.7 million. Unofficially, it is believed to be closer to $8 million, at least $30 million at today's values. When probate is granted on the will, Ludwig and Roberts reveal that it allocates only small amounts of cash to Roger Claude's closest friends. Amounts of $10,000 and $5,000, far less than the hundreds of thousands they had expected to receive. Fury erupts. A brief legal challenge is launched by one friend, but is later dropped. For Ludwig, the mourning period is short. He's soon out on the town every night, taking drugs, drinking, dancing and romancing. He meets and begins an affair with a young, handsome, muscular Italian labourer named Vince Esposito. But he also begins receiving sinister phone calls and death threats.
What is this?
Someone, somewhere, knows that Ludwig's time is running out. Friends notice he appears to be living in constant fear. His hands often shake. He begins to drink heavily and take a range of recreational drugs. He secures the Paddington mansion with bars on the windows and locked iron security grills on the doors, including the skylight and even the door to his bedroom.
What the hell's going on?
Inevitably, with all the pills and booze, his friendships begin to fall apart. It's rumoured members of the gay world see Ludwig having heated arguments with both Roberts and Esposito, although this is never substantiated.
Lay off him!
Then, suddenly, in October 1990, Ludwig disappears. It is the eve of the annual Sleaze Ball, a major event on the Sydney gay social calendar that Ludwig would never miss. So Ludwig's friends immediately call police. Ken Bowditch of Paddington Police takes charge of the investigation.
We conducted all what we call the normal standard inquiries into doing canvasses, getting statements of all the last people to see him, all the places he visited. He had friends up from Melbourne, statements from them, full canvass of Oxford Street and any of the gay bars and steam rooms.
Police established that Ludwig visited Vince Esposito at his apartment in the inner western suburb of Ashfield. Esposito says they argued and Ludwig phoned Brian Roberts and asked him to come and pick him up. Roberts says he drove Ludwig into the city, dropping him off in Oxford Street. Somewhere, sometime on this Friday night in October 1990, Ludwig Gertz is strangled with an elastic Oki luggage strap, suffocated with a tea towel gag and his body then wrapped in a doona cover. One neighbour at the Ashfield block of flats says she had a doona cover stolen from her clothesline. Another neighbour at the flats remembers seeing two men carrying a large roll of carpet out of the apartment block. Vince Esposito admits to removing the bedroom carpet from the flat. Does the carpet contain clues to the murder?
When Vince left the apartment, suddenly before Christmas, not long after Ludwig had disappeared, the real estate agent discovered that the carpet was missing. And Vince's story was that his children had been sick on it, so he had to move. He got rid of it, which is, bizarre in itself. But I understand that the police actually searched for the carpet and they were told it was burnt, so there was no trace of the carpet, which makes you think that there may have been something further in the carpet that, someone was trying to hide.
In November 1990, 3 weeks after the disappearance, a bushwalker in the Blue Mountains west of Sydney comes upon Ludwig's decomposing body wrapped in a doona cover sheet. Detective Ken Bowditch calls in the homicide squad, but a post-mortem provides little in the way of clues as to who committed the brutal murder.
From what the pathologist could tell us, he was strangled. There was no evidence of any other injuries other than the strangulation. There was a wedding ring, there was the sheet, of course, the hockey straps. Apart from that, very little, because the body was quite bad. It was in November the body was found and been very hot, and the body was quite badly decomposed.
After Ludwig's funeral and burial, Brian Roberts produces Ludwig's will, showing he left all his millions to Vincent Esposito. Brian Roberts is named as the sole executor. This will later proves to be a forgery. The murder investigation continues, and detectives go undercover in gay bars and bathhouses. One of the problems is that some people seem to be afraid to talk, and investigators meet what they describe as a wall of silence and fear.
I always had the feeling that, you know, they were holding back on something, that they knew a little bit more than they could have told us. And that wasn't just a gut feeling. It was just sometimes they'd go cold if you asked them different leading questions.
Ludwig's close friend believes there is an unnamed, powerful person behind the murder, and that many people are afraid of that person.
I don't know if I'm comfortable going on record as to saying, you know, who I believe did it. But suffice it to say that when the police did get round to actually interviewing me, that they had already come to the same conclusion that I had, but they could prove it no more than I could.
At this stage, there is no investigation into Ludwig's forged will. Probate is granted, and Roberts and Esposito now control the whole fortune. Over the next 2 years, under the powers granted in the will, money is withdrawn in large amounts from Ludwig's bank accounts, and the Paddington mansion is stripped of all its treasures, fine antiques and works of art. The house is sold along with other properties, the last of Roger Claude's multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. Finally, with homicide detectives at a dead end, a fraud squad detective steps in to look closely at Ludwig's will. More than 2 years after the brutal killing and the dissipation of millions of dollars, the trusted solicitor, Brian Barrington Roberts, is arrested for forging Ludwig's will. He is charged with 1 count each of forging a will and uttering a forged will, and 3 counts each of making and using a false instrument. He's struck off the roll of solicitors, convicted and sentenced to 4 years jail.
It's just greed. I see it again and again and again. This is one of the worst cases of it, where you'll do anything. You'll steal, lie. And there was so much money involved.
Both the sudden and suspicious death of the flamboyant gay millionaire Roger Claude and the subsequent brutal murder of his last lover, Ludwig Goetsch, remain a mystery. In 1994, a coroner's inquest finds that on the balance of probabilities, Ludwig Goetsch was murdered in the main bedroom of Vince Esposito's Ashfield apartment after 7 p.m. on Friday, October the 19th, 1990. But the coroner cannot say who was responsible, simply that on the balance of probabilities, he was strangled and smothered by a person or persons unknown. Could it have been a contract killing? In April 2004, almost 14 years later, the New South Wales Homicide Squad reopens the Ludwig Goetsch murder case. Strikeforce catalogue is formed to go over what few clues are left. Investigators use the latest forensic technology to try to detect and examine traces of blood and DNA in the Ashfield flat. One of the men seen carrying the carpet out of the flat was wearing a ruby earring and a round, gold-faced watch with a black band. There are few other clues, and a reward of $100,000 is offered for information. By 2006, the new Police Strike Force catalogue has uncovered some sensational new evidence. The new police inquiry finally started to break through the web of silence surrounding Ludwig's murder. Some of Brian Roberts' tougher business partners were by now either dead or very ill. Among them, Abe Saffron and the gay nightclub queen, Dawn O'Donnell. A few key people in the case finally felt safe to tell the truth. Brian Roberts' former wife is one of those to come forward with dramatic new evidence.
Brian Roberts' wife, I think her name is Leonie, contacted detectives and said, along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing here, my brother, my former husband, and it was a bitter divorce, has admitted to being responsible for Ludwig's murder. And that starts a brand new police inquiry. And that brand new police inquiry leads to a coroner's inquest.
The new coroner's inquest opens in 2006, and Vince Esposito sensationally admits that he lied to the original inquest because he was terrified of Roberts and his associates. Vince now says that acting on Roberts' orders, he actually lured Ludwig to the Ashfield apartment on the night of the disappearance. As soon as Ludwig arrived, Vince says he went off with his children for a few hours, leaving Ludwig and Roberts alone at the apartment.
They come back late that night. The carpet's gone from the bedroom and there's no sign of Ludwig. Vince is particularly dark because he won't get his bond back because the carpet's missing. So he has a blue with Brian Roberts over the carpet and so on, and that's when Roberts starts really ramping up the threats. This is what Vince alleges, and he tells the court this.
Roberts, who by now is calling himself Brian Roberts Mannering, takes the stand and continues to deny everything. When the hearing concluded, the coroner ruled that the evidence was strong enough to convict a known person and said the matter should be referred to the Director of Public Prosecutions. But mysteriously, many years later, still no one has been charged.
They didn't think they had the evidence to successfully prosecute the case. I don't know, I thought that was pretty crazy. I've run it past a couple of decent criminal lawyers who scratch their head and wonder what the hell the DPP are doing.
And so the case of the will of death has gone cold again.